anxiety about the unknown.
I could hear the steps.
He had all
walking up
black
the
eyes.
stairs.
There was no
All of a sudden, this
light in
huge
his eyes.
object with lights was on
And
top
it
of
made
us.
no sound.
The fear. Yes, this happened.
I began to see a small creature, something similar to a small dwarf, a person of very, very short stature. And that person would come out of my closet or from under my bed or would sit in the chair in front of me. And he frequented me in these sleep paralysis. He made very strange noises.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Yes, This Happened. Today we'll hear from Memo, who lived a terrifying experience in his teens as a result of his young and rebellious curiosity. An experience that opened a door which perhaps should have remained closed, and led him to go through one of the strangest and most bizarre moments of his life.
Sometimes we believe that the paranormal, the curious, the strange does not exist among us, and yet suddenly we find coincidences or circumstances that make us doubt this assertion. This happened practically 30 years ago, maybe a little more, when I was in my teens and I was still a very restless, dynamic, athletic teenager. I have always been one of those people who sleep very little, with many plans in my mind and with many activities in the day. And, my father was immersed in politics for a very long time, in politics and in public service, which led him to be in high places in the political elite in Mexico City and interact with interesting people, but also sometimes people with strange customs. I'm going to omit the names, but in his work around the beginning of the 70s or late 60s, he was linked to a family that the father was a high political hierarch, and one of the sons, who became very close friends with my father, had strange customs linked to the occult and to diabolical occult forces, and he liked all that stuff. That led him to collect things and articles that surely had very negative connotations. And one of them was a record, a vinyl record that contained rock music on one side and a recording of a black mass on the other side. And that record appeared close to my adolescence, my teenage years, several years later, because my father brought many things from Mexico when he returned to live in Puebla and brought that record among those things. So I was a restless young man, about 15, 16 years old. I found it amongst several tapes and vinyls, and I said, what is this? I'm going to play this and be the bad guy, and me and my friends are going to play this and see what rare powers we are going to acquire. But the reality is that I don't think any of my friends had the courage to be able to do this, and they kept avoiding the issue. Until one night, I just decided to just listen to this album by myself. And of course, on the side of the Black Mass.
The recording on side B of the vinyl record that Memo plays is a real recording of a Black Mass, commonly considered as a ritual worship of Satan and a parody of the Christian Mass, in which all Christian symbols are replaced by demonic signs.
I remember it was one night on a weekend. I lived in a house in downtown in the city of Puebla, Cinco Poniente. And those houses, they obviously had a lot of noise because they were old houses. The pipes made sounds, or the woods cracked on the floor, the windows creaked. But after having heard this, well, frankly rare experience of a black mass that, in reality, as I recall, large parts were silences and strange noises that I couldn't identify. That night precisely, there was a strange kind of storm. There was rain and sand, wind, which made the house shake from its foundation, it appeared. I'm not saying that this had anything to do with it, but it was a huge coincidence because I remember that even my mother was very scared. The windows were opened by the wind, the doors were slammed, and all this in the very early morning. The thing is that from then on, my nights were no longer as calm as they were before. They were very restless, and I began to have interrupted dreams. I slept for very short periods of time, and all with a feeling of unease, as if something or someone was watching me, and that made me really alert. At some point, I began to have sleep paralysis, and within the sleep paralysis, I began to have some visions of something that will surely amaze you.
Memo has messed with something that he doesn't fully understand. But what consequences will this have? Stay with us.
Yes, this happened.
After playing a vinyl record with a recording of a black mass, Memo has begun to have trouble sleeping, has had a feeling that someone is watching him, and even sleep paralysis and visions. All of these events are precursors to what turns out to be the most terrifying experience in Memo's life: a visitor from the dark side.
I began to see a small creature, something similar to a small dwarf, a person of very, very short stature. And that person would come out of my closet or from under my bed or would sit in the chair in front of me. And he frequented me in these sleep paralysis. He made very strange noises. He made this babbling sound, and in addition to his short stature, he had a very peculiar characteristic that was as if he were wearing like a harlequin hat, one of those hats with three pointy edges, like a jester. And, well, at various times in those sleep paralysis, he stood on the bed or sat on my chest, which was horrifying. And then I desperately tried to wake up until I was able to, and then I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep, obviously, from the fear and just panic and these experiences that were truly very distressing. The apparitions and the dreams continued. They became more frequent, and on some occasions I asked him with great curiosity and with great insistence who he was. And on one occasion he answered and told me that his name was Ael. Ael, just like it sounds. And I had no idea what that meant. So I really tried not to pay attention to him. But then the matter became unbearable, frankly, and I even started having episodes of sleepwalking. I woke up inside the closet on several occasions, and, well, finally, we were already living with my mother. My parents had separated during this time. And we lived with my mother, and she began to worry seriously, to the point that she decided to take action and asked me if I wanted to somehow do something to avoid this issue that was truly unbearable. So the thing is that he kept appearing at night with certain frequency, and on one occasion, I felt physically threatened. I felt pain. I felt that he was squeezing me, scratching me, and then things became just more aggressive. So I had to tell my mom, yes, let's look for some way, some kind of help.
Memo's mother desperately asks some acquaintances and relatives until she finds a medium who offers her help.
So she ended up asking around with her friends and found a lady that did limpias. So this lady went to the house to do some kind of overview or examination of what was happening, trying to feel something. And she found, as I remember, various negative energies, which she felt. She also saw many shadows and many malevolent beings or dark beings hidden inside the house, and especially in my room. And she began to do some kind of ritual, like some kind of healing ritual to further harmonize the environment in the house. And with that, things improved almost instantaneously and magically. However, months later, he appeared again, in a dream with insistence. So, seeing my desperation, my mother consulted a priest she knew. We are not, the truth is that we were never deeply Catholic, nor we were regulars at Mass, much less, but we have faith in some way. It's a support in difficult times. And my mother told him about this question I had posed about the name. And then the priest called back the next day, and he was quite concerned. And he told us that within demonology, there is a prince of darkness. They're organized as a type of military organization. And the prince or general is in charge of several regiments or demons. And one of them, the name was Ail, which is a Sumerian demon. And that entity has the characteristic of being a short being with 3 horns. So the coincidence is enormous for me, who I have never studied demonology or strange things, so it was very clear to me that I had gotten into something serious. Finally, the priest took several liters of water from San Ignacio de Loyola, who is characterized by being the relentless fighter against demons and evil spirits. And he made several prayers, and then things practically ceased. The dreams were over. Nothing else. I believe that there are many things that go beyond our own understanding, and in that little understanding of things, there are times that ignorance is a hidden door to these forces that are waiting precisely to have those gaps in order to be able, in a certain way, to manifest themselves in our days, in our lives, in our paths, and surely take from us part of our energy, of our vital force. And I think that was one of the greatest lessons I had, or I learned, about getting involved with issues that we do not know, or in which we should not get involved. The situation was made worse because I entered an alley with a dead end. The regret, of course, was enormous for having done this. But the weird thing is the last part of this story. Much later, maybe about 5 years later, the infamous vinyl record had been forgotten completely. We didn't even remember about it. It was forgotten in some corner of another house where my father lived. And one day my father gave several things to my mother, which included many records and many newspaper clippings and so on. She took them to the apartment where we already lived, which was a different house. And after this, she put the record under an armchair in the TV room, and I never knew about it. And I remember one night I was talking on the phone with a girlfriend, And back then you talked for hours on the phone as a teenager. We still didn't have cell phones. But it was a custom to talk on the house phone. It was a landline. And as I was talking to my girlfriend, I heard breathing. As if someone was sitting next to me on the couch. I knew absolutely nothing about the album being there until I told my mom that night. I told her I feel strange, I'm scared, this happened. And I saw that she immediately turned pale. She didn't say anything to me. And the next day, she took the album to the outside of a church, I think it was, and they sprayed gasoline on it and burned it. And finally, after that, we never heard from the famous album again. It just ended. It seems that it definitely closed that door, so I learned not to play with what we don't know. Because these stories will surely leave us with nightmares for our posterity.
They say that curiosity killed the cat, and in this case, fortunately, it didn't go that far. Memo's story leaves us with the moral that whoever plays with fire can get burned. And the events experienced by him and his family remain with us as proof of paranormal events that transcended their dimension to meet us at ours. What do you think?